In our Data Masterclass podcast, data leaders share their unique stories. In this episode, we talk to Kim Kordel, who worked as co-lead Data and Insights and IoT lead at LeadSwiss Post. We talked about the role of IoT in data analytics. Let us welcome your host, Alex Borek.
Hello, data leaders. I'm excited to have Kim Kordel with us, who is the head of the Data and Insights unit at LeadSwiss Post, together with a joint colleague. Yeah, it's a co-leadership position. And Kim will tell us also a lot about her experience in IoT, because she was one of the pioneers in IoT in Germany, working at Bosch beforehand and now doing that also at LeadSwiss Post for a while. Welcome to the Data Masterclass podcast, Kim.
Thank you, Alex, for having me. So great to be here.
So let's start with maybe your current company, LeadSwiss Post. You know, probably every one of us has an image in our head what a Post is doing, what a Post company is doing, but probably that image is quite wrong. So what is LeadSwiss Post doing actually? I mean, what is it all about?
Probably it's a bit wrong, but of course it's like still a postal service, right? So Swiss Post is the post of Switzerland, and it's a bit different to the German post that we have like a bit of different business units also there. So in general, of course, it's still about logistics. It's about like delivering the mail at the end of the day and the parcels to the end customers. But of course, there's also a lot of different business units, like for example, the whole mobility services. Like we have a big fleet management, the largest fleet of Switzerland. There's also a unit called Post Auto, which have a lot of buses going around. Also to more rural areas. And there is also, for example, a unit called Communication Services, which is really working on transferring the secret of the letter, let's call it like that, into the digital world. So what happens if we're now communicating in the digital world, and how does that look like in future? So, and in general, there's also PostFinance. So financial services are also part of the business. And in general, there's quite a wide range of different business units coming together at Swiss Post. And therefore, it's a lot of things to do, and a lot of also digital and physical value creation that we have there. And as you said, like the image or the reputation of the Swiss Post, it's actually in Switzerland. This was the first thing I asked a colleague of mine or a friend of mine who was living in Switzerland back then, when I was approached by Swiss Post, and I say, like, how do you perceive Swiss Post? Like in general, do you think it's a boring company? Aren't they like, no, they're doing pretty great. Like there are a lot of like e-mobility. They have like great digital services and so on. So the whole reputation of Swiss Post is very innovative. And for now, I can like totally agree on that.
Well, and I think then the question was spot on, because it's so much more than post office. And it sounds like it's, half of the company is like in transportation and mobility and other kind of services that are serving the population besides the post services.
Exactly, definitely. So a lot of part is service public, as we call it. There's like always this multilingual thing, right? So we have a lot of like French, Italian, and everything has to be in all three languages. So a lot of service public going on, and especially like serving the Swiss people also in times of digitalization. So this is very interesting.
And what is your role inside the Swiss Post? I think it also transformed over time. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. So in April last year, I actually started as an IoT lead, as the IoT lead of the Swiss Post. So I started to being responsible for building up the IoT capabilities also of the Swiss Post, engaging with the business units, and just making it more smart and more connected in a way. And then we had a big reorganization, and we formed a new data unit, which is called Data and Insights. And at the end, this Data and Insights unit is combining all the data competencies of the Swiss Post in a central manner. So there are three teams. It's the business intelligence team, the advanced analytics team, and the big data and warehousing team, and also several experts where we have new roles set up for them, that they are also leaders, but like expert leaders with a virtual team, not a disciplinary one. And there are still topics of IoT, AI, data intelligence, and of course the execution of the data strategy. So we all packed it into one data unit. And now I'm co-leading this together with a colleague of mine next to my IoT job, as you mentioned.
And I guess that it sounds like this is for the first time that you packed all these teams into a central team. They evolved over time in different parts of the company. Yeah, is that right?
Exactly. So the BI team used to be the SAP team and really like having a lot of things to do with central reporting and so on. And then they cut this a little bit to separate like really the financial reporting from like dashboarding and reporting things for other purposes. And also the self-service analytics topic is emerging there now. And the analytics or the advanced analytics team was together with the RPA and automation colleagues, where we were looking into like more digital enabling topics, like more the advanced digital innovation things that were going on. And the big data and data warehousing team was like sitting somewhere in IT, like really like doing ETL stuff. And now everything is combined, and we see that there are like a lot of synergies and a lot of topics that can be covered when those three teams actually work together. And that's now the journey that we are heading to.
What was the main reasoning to put them together? I mean, that's quite a change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at the end, there was this strategic direction of the Swiss Coast becoming a data-driven company. And you can't become a data-driven company if you only have analytics and a bit of automation, maybe, but you really need like the database for that. You need people doing analytics on their own, actually using data for decision making and so on. And there was like no other way than putting all those competencies together and so accelerating the whole topic, because otherwise it wouldn't work. So I think this was the major idea, like really putting force into the topic of becoming data driven.
And when you look at the major sort of ways you now plan to scale value, I hear from what you're saying that, I mean, self-service analytics is really important, mm-hmm. but probably IoT will continue to play a role, and also maybe a few other things. Like how about, the whole AI part and big data part? Is that also relevant?
Mm-hmm. Extremely relevant right now, especially now with the whole discussions on generative AI. This really scaled up, like really the executive board, everybody's talking about it, and we're setting up a little team for that also, to really serve those like peak use cases that are now being found in every business unit. And this is exactly the thing, right? So if you want to do AI, you have to like take care of the database, and that's why everything is connected at the end. But it is the case that AI is actually the most sexy topic. So we are trying to push that into the business unit directions, but also always say that if you want to do AI, you have to invest in data, and that's the way to go.
And what would you say is specific about the environment you're in? I mean, you worked in other environments before. Mm-hmm. Anything, when it comes to data, when it comes to analytics and AI?
I think that the environment right now is really like, it's very decentral in a way, because we have the whole different business units. And we, for example, have a business unit as logistics services that was used to be also separated a bit more. So there was like letters in one business unit and parcels in the other business unit. And they completely build up their systems. They completely build up their data. And now everything comes together, like even only from an LS or logistics services perspective. And on the other hand, we have business units like Post Auto, which are very close to the government also, which has different expectations, also different topics there. And then we have the unit communication services, which also acquires a lot of new companies for growing actually revenue in the digital age and for being future-proof there. It's about digital identities. It's about like very advanced topics, right? So the maturity level of how to work with data and how to take data-driven decisions, how to like also the knowledge when it comes about data is very different in different parts of the company. And I think that's very special about it.
Mm-hmm. And so basically you need, and how do you address that? I mean, you have very, very different needs, yeah, and also maturity grades, mm-hmm, and probably expectations and literacy levels. And when it comes to data literacy, what's your learning so far, how to address that?
I think it's like really individual. So what we set up is a role called digital partner. So from our digital enabling unit in which we are also in as Data and Insights. And there are really people like being the not a single point of contact, but the point of contact for those different business teams also in the business. And it's a lot about personal communication. It's a lot about understanding, being empathetic, and like really understanding the needs. And therefore, when it comes to data literacy, we will of course have to look into personas and see how different they will be and they are. And also the biggest challenge is probably to see where to start with, right? Do we start from a more basic level? Do we start on a more like intermediate level to scale those people up? This is definitely the discussions we're having right now. And it will also depend on which business unit will want to work with us right away so that we can just go ahead with people who are also eager to learn.
I fully agree with that. I think it's so important to also start with the ones, build a coalition of the willing.
Exactly.
When you start something like that off.
Yeah.
To get some momentum.
Yeah.
Great. So what was actually the journey that you had beforehand, before you joined Swiss Post, Kim?
It was a very nice journey, to be honest. So I started at Bosch already during my studies. It was called Bosch Software Innovations back then, and they were actually having an IoT unit there, which was in Berlin, and it consisted of 3 startups that they put together and said, okay, now let's enable Bosch to become the world leading IoT company, right? And they were building up a huge IoT platform, and they knew that, okay, you can't really throw technology at customers, right? And expect them to build great use cases. So when I started, I was like the second employee in the business consulting team to really build up consulting for IoT business models and really to how to make money with that, to consult the people there also. And this was a great learning journey for me because we really were supposed to also not only look into Bosch internal units, but also on the external markets. And I had a lot of contact with different companies and we built up methodology. We had methodology trainings. I was also a teaching trainer there, and we were like spreading around our approach on how to build up IoT business models. And that was really a lot of fun. And it also evolved that we built up a startup accelerator out of that, which is still going on. That's the Bosch Startup Harbor. And we also saw that, okay, if we want to look into IoT, there are a lot of different startups on the market who are already doing great things and which would need to connect maybe to the assets also of Bosch. So we really built that accelerator from scratch with also EU money. So we applied for getting money from the European Union also for that. And this was also very interesting. Then I kind of moved away from this startup harbor when there was like the second or third batch, because I wanted to like do something a bit more new. And then I kind of like got into this whole energy market, which was very interesting time, energy and building, because we saw that we have a lot of energy customers with our smart metering software. And we were like looking for new business models to approach them with. And this was then my job to really build up like new business for the energy customers. And therefore, this was rather like an IoT business development role. So we really were like looking into the market, looking into the needs. What are the needs of the energy customers? What could be additional business models to offer them? And from that, we also like then had a new business unit called Smart Living, because we say, okay, energy is like not an end in itself, right? It has to be consumed somewhere. And this is also the people who are needing digital services and data-driven services. And this was also a very interesting journey. And then, Swiss Post approached me, and then I went there. But it was a lot about like generating value and building up new business based on data, on IoT data, actually. But it was a very cool and interesting journey, and a great thing to work at Bosch, which was then called Bosch IO, which is now Bosch Digital. So kind of a lot of reorganizations going on also, but still a great company.
Great journey. And you probably learned a thing or two about business models in IoT during that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's, it sounds like business models in IoT, in the Internet of Things, are very different depending on the context. Is that right? And are there any bigger patterns that you see across?
Bigger patterns, yeah. So I think that like business modeling in IoT can be very hard also, because you always have this investment into hardware. You have a lot of costs going on. You have a huge thing with total cost of ownership. So I think that the biggest pattern that I saw is that usually people tend towards solving smaller problems or minor problems with IoT because you just can put a sensor into something and then you get the data and then you solve one problem for one single person, for example, or for a smaller group of people. And it really is about finding a larger impact or a set of use cases that can be done with the same infrastructure. So this really is about not finding the one killer use case that every company wanted to find like back then, but it really is about having a portfolio of IoT. I mean, we talked about data products, like it was actually it's IoT products, right? It's also data products in a way. It always was, but
Yes.
this really is about finding real value, finding a problem solution fit, and then really being honest and is this actually worth solving this problem with connectivity?
And what would you say, like when you look in different sort of spaces where IoT is used, what are maybe the different kind of categories or spaces how IoT is leveraged? Like maybe around consumer products and then industrial usage or any other sort of categories that can help to get your heads around.
Yeah. Maybe let's start like from an internal perspective. So the one thing that IoT is definitely used for is to really like monitoring operational things, right? So monitoring what's the state of my sorting machines, what's the state of whatever, like really just visualizing the data and see, okay, is there a peak reached or is there an anomaly or something? And this is really about those monitoring use cases that are used quite a lot. Which we were always not such a fan of. Like, for example, our UX team had t-shirts with a dashboard is not a solution, right? So we always said like, okay, so what? Now you know that the machine is broken, but where's the process in actually solving this problem? Like, if you know that there is something going on, right? So, but this is still like one major application, of course, like monitoring and just like gaining transparency over the physical things that are going on in the company. The other is like having more like already, let's say, analytics in it or really like problem solving, like for example, using camera detection, having edge devices and really like having something in place where it also like triggers an action after that. So for example, somebody coming and reducing the maintenance and doing things like that. So I think this is like one level further. And of course, when it comes to consumer products, IoT is best if you don't even see it, right? If you just have a great customer experience and you don't even know that there is like IoT inside, and you don't even call it IoT, but you call it like a comfortable home because all the lights are like turning into the color that you like, and and health insurance, of course, it's much more about the insights and the user experience than about IoT there, and this is really where the connectivity plays like, of course, an important part, because if you have like false positives or something, this is not cool, right? In health, especially. But it's not about the IoT more, but it's more about really having a business development and a product and like combining it with different user experiences. For example, with gamification also and other things where you can actually leverage the data for a user problem.
And I guess, once you have IoT embedded, it's really about the data you get out of them, and sometimes near real time. So you can even maybe have a two-way communication to do things. But it is actually the value is by leveraging the data. Is that a fair statement?
It is definitely a fair statement. And when it comes to IoT, it's also about like optimizing exactly how much you need and which quality you need. Because if you push data like every second, then it's going to be extremely expensive, especially if you have like cloud to cloud connections afterwards going on and so on. So sometimes it's even enough like getting the data one time an hour or like not having the complete set. Also leveraging edge technologies, right? So having the intelligence on an edge and just pushing to the cloud whatever you need, that there's already insights generated a bit there and a bit structured data. So it is about the data, yes, but I mean, we could even say that in IoT, it's about trying it out, like having the least data you need for the use case, right? So not the more the better, but the less the better.
And you mentioned that it takes quite a bit of effort to actually implement IoT. It's quite, in particular, the upfront effort to get it up and running. I mean, I figure because it is quite a messy environment. I mean, you're now sort of interconnecting the real world, which often is not connected, and you need to retrofit things. You need to install devices And then a lot of the devices have different formats.
Yep.
Is that?
Yeah, totally true. And that's why all the integration platforms are becoming like so important, and the integration layer on top, which is like when you look into business models at Bosch, for example, it's mostly about becoming an integration layer for something, for example, the building industry. Because you have like 1,000 of different systems with different formats, different connectivity, different, so this is becoming extremely important. And also there it's about like integrating the right partners, right? The right technologies, the right systems, because you can't go for all because it's just too expensive. So it's also really about selecting the right ones to partner with. And this is why IoT is usually also becoming ecosystem business model, because you have to partner a lot and have to communicate a lot with different companies and so on.
Now, when it comes to the hardware, that really depends. Is that right? Like it completely depends on the application. Even like inside one factory, you might have lots of different parts and pieces of lots of different suppliers, but also in consumer products, you might have different pieces of hardware.
Yeah.
That's very, very diverse. Is that?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Do I observe it right?
Yeah, absolutely correct. And it's also because like usually you purchase something for your single problem, right? You don't look into like having an IoT buyer or IoT able device strategy for your whole sorting center, for example, right? So, but you purchase that what you need and where the features are right and where the price is right, and then everything has like different connectivity types, and then you're screwed in a way. But that's why the integration layer is so important.
And it reminds me actually of the software world, because I mean, in the software world, the same thing is happening. Like we're creating enormous complexity because everyone is buying the software that fits their needs.
Yeah.
And then we need to connect these software pieces that were never designed to be interconnected in the, at least it creates a lot of effort. And because you have such a diverse set of different software tools in the company, it's really hard to manage integration well.
Yeah.
And it seems like in the hardware world, this seems to be quite similar.
It is definitely similar. And it's also that it comes together that people responsible for those systems are not like IT people, right? So you always have this integration between operational technology, OT, and then IT. And then the integration takes part on the IT side, but like, how do you explain it to the ones owning the system that the data is like needed somewhere else also, right? So it's really an issue there. And that's why also when we're now looking into the digital logistics, where I also mentioned at the Masterclass that we have a vision for 2030 and so on, we as an IoT team really like approached that team and said, hey, we really see a connectivity risk here, right? That you like put everything, like you want to collect data from all over, and then you purchase from buyer A and from buyer B, and then sometimes it's not even that the buyers or the OEMs, for example, of the machines, they are happy to give you all the data, right? So sometimes you also have to ask for it. You have to find it, like really ask for having it in the right format also. And now we really have the chance to like have that risk like reduced and really having an overall, let's call it IoT strategy or connectivity strategy or whatever, or just like having somebody to have an eye on that we're not like raising different types.
And sometimes you really need contracts, because what I've found like working in automotive is that suppliers really want to have a data. Like you need to make sure that you have the right to get the data.
Exactly.
And to store the data.
Yeah, exactly. And even if it's your data, sometimes they give you like access to a dashboard, and you will have to pay for that because you see the aggregated data there already. And it's a nice, fleet management software that you get, but you don't get the raw data, for example. And it's like from a contract perspective, like, exactly. So really also a contractual thing here.
And it's also a legal, there are some legally open topics as well, because sometimes it's not clear who actually owns the data, who has the right for that data.
Yeah.
Particularly when you have consumers involved, it becomes very tricky, but also with suppliers.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like, giving one example also in the smart living environment. So we were like approaching the housing industry. So for example, if you have a smart washing machine, and you want to like just put it there, for example, in a furnished apartment, and like, okay, then somebody gets an app for that. But like, how do you share the data? Like the housing industry is not owning it, and the customer is not really owning it because they're not owning the washing machine, for example. So this really is hindering some use cases right now because this topic is not clear, and it's negotiation all the time and finding creative ways.
And I guess for one use case, sometimes it's a bit of an overkill.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely.
So we need more standards. I mean, it's still, how do you see standards evolving, in that industry, in the IoT? I mean, IoT is now a couple of years old.
Mm-hmm.
I think around 2010, probably.
Yeah.
We started to really heavily hear of IoT
Yeah.
together with the big data paradigm when everything started to be interconnected.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think the standard topic is the topic that is like hindering a lot of things, but also like is going to enable a lot of things, because some people many companies are not taking any decisions on, for example, moving into integration, because there was supposed to be a standard coming in 2 years, and why should we invest the money now in actually integrating everything? And when it comes to smart home, for example, this actually happened. Right. So also at Bosch, there is this business model, or how is it called? Home Connect Plus, which was the business model was just like integrating all the different vendors. And now there was this standard coming up, which is called Matter. And it's actually coming from an energy perspective to actually integrate like all the, like also the solar systems and right. So the PV Anlagen and in general, like together with your heat pump and everything. And this is like heavily going into the smart home direction also. And there is going to be this open standard now, and there is no need for an integrator, right? And the plan was to have digital services on top of that. And now this is becoming very, very hard. And they even stopped the whole business now. So it happens.
Yeah. So it's a very, very volatile situation because of the standards still evolving.
Yeah, exactly. And you really have to gamble. You don't know when it comes. Or I mean, you can sit in committees there. You can be part of the discussion. You will have to have a hand on the pulse that is going on. But yeah.
So you really need to choose your bets. That's what I take from there, because you cannot, like, it's too risky to do it probably all in at the moment of IT, unless it's a big bet for you.
Exactly. Unless you say that the problem is worth it, even if it's unclear. And I think there are a lot of situations where this actually is the case.
That's true. I'm thinking of the Thermomix, which is now interconnected, which is I think that's been a fabulous success story, because I think now a large proportion of the revenues go through digital services.
Exactly.
I'm thinking of the wind farms, I think, that are very well interconnected, that have been optimized really a lot. I'm thinking of connected car, which has been, is continuing to be a success story, I think, even if it's very hard. So I think there are a lot of sort of big bets that actually turning out well.
Exactly.
It's just that we probably spread out on too many use cases without the right focus.
Yeah, can be the case. And also, like when I talked about solving real problems and IoT is best when not seen, you don't see Thermomix as a IoT device. You wouldn't talk about it like that. You see it at smart home, for example, but smart home is also very hard to monetize when it comes to digital services. So it's better if you really like not look into like just the IoT thing, but like just doing like normal business development, right? Normal business venturing in a way, and then like using IoT for solving some problems. But yeah, there is no other way around.
And maybe let's come back to the role of IoT at Swiss Post. Why is it important, and what is important for Swiss Post and IoT?
So it is, I mean, as I said, Swiss Post has a lot of physical value creation, right? So a lot of things are going on in logistics, a lot of things going on in fleet management and so on. And you can't really manage what you cannot measure. Like that's like a very it's very known sentence, but it's actually true when it comes to CO2, for example, or when it comes to, we have a decentralization strategy also when it comes to the sorting centers. So there's going to be more, and not only like 1, 2, 3 bigger ones, but more like smaller ones. And there's going to be a lot of more inter-center connections also. And I mean, you could, of course, try to monitor that with an Excel list, and you're sending out like manual data, or you like call each other and so on. But you really need the transparency on your physical value creation. And it becomes more and more complex, and it becomes more and more important. And if you want to leverage analytics and AI in a company which the core business is a physical value, then it's just so needed to actually excel in that, and having the data set and having this also combined with IoT. And we already talked about that this evolved like completely different, right? The analytics topic evolved more from a software perspective, from applications that were like having data that you could analyze now, and IoT is coming more from an operational perspective, where machines were like more and more being connected. And now getting this together is really the only way to gain a competitive advantage in that area. And especially when it comes to sustainability, we have to know where we have which CO2 emissions. And this is only measured also if you measure it in the real world.
Absolutely. And you gave a wonderful keynote last week at the Data Masterclass Europe 2023 on the topic, on the role of IoT in analytics. And you gave us, I think five, do I recall it right, 5 big reasons why you should consider IoT in analytics. Maybe you can tell us, recap from there, what are the main reasons, for you to, from an analytics perspective, to look into IoT?
Yeah. Okay, I have to remember all 5 now.
Well, you don't have to tell all 5. We have that as a recording.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So the first one was really like there was an IoT data explosion going on within the last years. As you said, it's like IoT was not invented yesterday. It was already going on for some decades now, and there is a lot of IoT data that actually needs to be analyzed. That is just there and that can be used and has to be utilized, and there's just like no way around it to combine that with IoT. The second is, and we already mentioned it, the real-time thing, right? So you can really manage and analyze in real time, especially if you have a physical value creation in a very time-critical environment, in logistics, in delivery services, in food delivery maybe also, or in general in Industry 4.0, it's always time-sensitive. And IoT is really good in actually knowing what is going on in that very second and not like analyzing it from the historical data perspective. I think another way was also like another good reason was to predict the real world, combining IoT and analytics to really make predictions and really have great cost savings there, because you have maintenance costs that they are immense. They are often done on a regular basis without data. And if you could predict what is going to be happening, then you can actually save a lot of cost there. And of course, just make your operations better and actually knowing which was used in what way, and having also implications on the real world, maybe reorganizing the structure, how your centers work, how your plants work. So there are a lot of good reasons.
And when you want to get it done, and thank you for the great recap, Kim, when you want to get this done, when you want to bring those two words together in practice, I find that is harder than you would think.
Yeah.
Because as you said, we've been almost evolving in different paradigms. Like IoT was very use case centric. That's at least my perception. Yeah. And very close to the operational world. And now we want to make it more interconnected with, across the company or across your business model. And it requires quite a lot of effort, and also two worlds speaking to each other, and, that don't speak maybe necessarily the same language, don't share the same ways of working and standards. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it is. And it's pretty, it's not so obvious, right? It's not so obvious in actually even doing it. So I'm very happy that IoT is part of the Data and Insights unit. So we are kind of forced to working together, and I totally love it, because we come into contact with, even when I started as an IoT person, right, at the data and analytics team, this was really oh, that's amazing. I learned so much about all those topics, because it was not naturally connected neither at Bosch. So we're now talking about AIoT, we're now talking about analytics, but this wasn't like that 3 years ago or 4 years ago. This is kind of new in a way. And now we're really screening okay, which data coming from machines and so on is actually worth putting it into our core analytics platform and actually running some exploration on the data that we have there. But we first, of course, need a business need for that. We need a use case for that. And now we're back at the IoT, let's say, business modeling or product development, right? So we really have to come from a problem. We don't want to do it just because we want to do it, yes. But we want to identify a problem where you need that for. And those problems are not so obvious because there was a lot of years spent on how to solve it differently, like having apps from the machine. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I fully agree. It's interesting that you're sort of back to square one, just on a higher level.
Yeah, you're back to square one and finding an actual problem to solve, and then having setting up the energy on to bring those two worlds together.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, probably as it plays out, you have it as a platform services, and the different business units have then people that are close to the business that are leveraging that. But as with any technology, in the beginning, you need to put some, some first sort of investment into getting this momentum going. Like you need use cases and the technology being set up at the same time.
Yeah.
And I guess for that, probably the approach that you're taking is spot on.
Yeah, and we see that now it's evolving from one project that was very successful. So we have this it's called ZOE, it's Zustandoptimierte Instandhaltung, where you actually have bit of predictive
maintenance.
Maintenance, yes. Yeah. You have maintenance based on pictures from a camera that is analyzed on the edge, and it's like an AIoT use case, right? And they saw it was very successful. You could really reduce the maintenance cost. Usually, this was done by a visual inspection, and it was done on a regular base. And when something broke down, there were immense costs going on. And now they saw, okay, this is very good. This is actually working. Now let's look into use cases that can be done on top of that, right? And now the data is analyzed. We see, is there any more data from the real world that we could analyze, and so on. And this is gaining the momentum now there, and we are ready for supporting that, of course. But yeah, as you said, you need this momentum coming from the business, because otherwise it's we wanted to look into your IoT data. Maybe we can analyze that. That's not the way to go.
And it's great that you're mentioning it, because I think in AI, you have a similar thing that I observed. Like you usually have a bigger use case that needs to work. And then you have at least 5 use cases that are smaller, that are piggybacking on that large use case, because then the tech setup is there. Maybe you have the data in shape like an IoT, and then you can with low cost realize these other use cases, which give you almost your additional margin on the use case overall. Like it gives you then actually a lot of net benefit that maybe at the beginning is ignored, and when we predict how much value it will create, because we're focusing on the big one. The small ones are not really worth it by themselves.
Exactly.
But together you have that network effect.
Yeah, totally agree. So really this is and it's a bit contradictory, because we always say, start with an MVP, right? Don't make it too big for building it and so on. But we always say, okay, start small, but think big. In a way, think of really use cases that have subsequent business models on top that are able to be extended, where the value is also there from maybe another target group. But start with one user group and then extend from that. But yeah, it's a bit contradictory, but it actually makes sense, starting small but thinking bigger, because especially in IoT, I don't know how it's in AI, I think it's the same. It's you can't really find that one killer use case that is already covering all the costs that you have in setting everything up.
Yes. So overall, I mean, you started to give a first round of advice, and which general advice would you give to other leaders starting off with IoT or starting off with IoT and analytics in specific, maybe?
Yeah, I would.
What are the things?
Yeah, I would really.
The pitfalls and things you need to watch, and maybe things you need to get right.
Yeah. Well, I think if I would imagine a company, right, with a setup and everything, I would teach the business developers how to use IoT and AI. Really the people who are sitting at the business, who have the methods in place to developing use cases, to developing business models, and teach them using IoT and AI and leveraging those capabilities there, because it's such a pity that usually the competencies for IoT and AI and analytics are sitting somewhere with the IT and the competencies for knowing which are the real pain points in the business, knowing the market developments, they are so often so separated, and it's just such a pity, because it could be so perfectly running together. And I think that you really need enablement there to teach the people who are working on the markets, working with the real business, just to have another tool in their toolbox for making their business development work. And it's really and I think this is my key message for the last years when I kept starting with IoT, and it still is, and it's still going to be probably forever. It's don't start with the tech, but start with the business problem. And it's not technology looking for a problem, how we usually approach it, but it's really looking for problems, and then maybe it's not IoT, maybe it's not AI that is being used, but still this should be the way forward. And we have to, of course, have competency centers for IoT. We need it for AI. We need people who really know how to do it once it's decided to be done, and what it can do and what it can't. But at least this basic knowledge really needs to be in the head of people whose role it is to develop the business. And this would be my major message always. And just approach it in a methodological way, approach it in a way how we would develop business models, how you would develop use cases, and don't do it differently just because it's tech.
What would you say is the toughest thing about doing IoT projects?
The toughest thing is really that when people approach you and say, hey, we need the help of the IoT team or something, then they're mostly thought of, okay, now we need this and this sensor. And really the toughest thing is to go back to zero and say, let's talk to the user. Let's validate the problem. So I think the toughest thing is making an IoT project to a business project, and really also making people invest into basic things like user research, basic things like business validation, like a market research maybe. And this is the toughest thing, and it still is. It just still is. Yeah.
So basically there's a lack of product management. So if you turn it around and say it more positive, invest into your product management, not only the technology.
Yes, definitely. And make product managers see the value of IoT and AI, and they will approach it. They will want to do it. They will want to go into this direction. And don't try to put the projects as an IT project as it is, like starting with a technical validation, for example. It still is the case that everybody wants to do a POC first. That's not how it's done still, even if it's still the case, and we see that we have to do it, but we try to validate at least business KPIs when we do the POC.
Great. And maybe the last advice with regards to communication towards senior management and senior stakeholders. What have you learned there, with regards to IoT? Anything specific, what you would, watch out when you communicate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe don't even call it IoT because it's like, okay, what is that even? Is it a technology? Is it a paradigm? Like, I think in the books, it's a paradigm about different things and use cases and technologies. So just talk about the business value. Talk about, hey, we want to have transparency over our operational efficiency. We want to know what we really use as fuel, for example. We want to just get transparency. We want to manage the real world, and we need that as a competitive advantage. And I think it's more about communicating about the use cases and the need for a connected infrastructure, let's call it like that, being able to get data from that, and therefore try to solve it strategically and not use case based, but more on a larger scale. But don't talk about IoT. Talk about having a connected, intelligent business in a way, and the use cases, and being able to see what the problems are and so on.
Wonderful. Maybe one last word on the Data Masterclass Europe 2023. You joined there as a keynote speaker, but also as an attendee. How was it for you?
Yeah, it was great experience. Seriously, Alex, thank you so much for setting that up again, because I already told you it was just really cool. It was 3 days packed with a lot of workshops. The workshop setting was also really cool, interactive. And almost everybody, it was like a knowledge it was a sharing, it was not a transfer. There were not people sitting just watching through their phones and letting it sink in a little bit, but almost everybody had a little active role, at least sharing and also receiving information. And that made it very special. And I think everybody of us, everyone I talked to, was so grateful for the experience, for getting so much out of it. And it was really cool. Thank you. Would definitely attend again.
Well, thank you so much for your contribution towards making a success. And thank you so much for sharing all these insights on Internet of Things, on the role of IoT in analytics, and not only at the event, but also here in the podcast. I think we went much more in depth now. And it was great to really, I think this is really valuable advice and valuable lessons learned, that way maybe some people can save a year or two just listening to this podcast. So thank you for that.
I really hope. And that I love talking about it. So thank you for giving me the chance to do that again. Thanks.
Borek Data Masterclass, where great data journeys begin.